Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of evolution.
I'm really interested in this topic. So let's jump right in. What's the central idea of evolution as laid out by Charles Darwin?
Well, Darwin's key idea, which he presented in 1859, is descent with modification. This basically means that all living things are connected and that they change gradually over time.
Interesting. And what drives these changes? Is it random chance, or is there a more directed force at play?
That's a great question. Darwin's theory hinges on this key mechanism called natural selection. It's not random. It's a process where individuals with traits that help them survive and reproduce more successfully pass those traits onto their offspring. It's like a filter, selecting for the most advantageous traits.
I see. So the environment plays a crucial role, right? A trait that's beneficial in one environment might be useless or even harmful in another.
Absolutely. It's all about adaptation. If you think about it, giraffes with longer necks are better suited to reaching high leaves in a savanna. They are more likely to survive and reproduce, so their long necks become more common in the population over time.
That makes sense. So natural selection is kind of like a constant experiment that's always happening in nature, right?
Precisely. And remember, these changes accumulate over generations. It's a slow process, but over long periods of time, these changes can lead to the emergence of entirely new species.
That's mind-blowing. It's hard to wrap my head around the idea of, a fish evolving into a land-dwelling animal. But I guess that's the power of evolution.
Exactly. And we have evidence for this. Fossil records show how species have changed over time, and genetic studies give us a deeper understanding of the relationships between species.
That's amazing. But it's not just natural selection, right? There are other factors involved.
You're right. Natural selection is the driving force, but it doesn't act alone. There are other mechanisms like mutation, genetic drift, and gene flow.
All right, let's break those down a bit. What are mutations?
Mutations are changes in DNA, the blueprint of life. They can happen randomly, and sometimes they introduce new traits into a population. Think of it like a typo in a book, but it can sometimes create something new and interesting.
Interesting. I'm trying to visualize this. Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. A mutation in a bacterial gene could lead to resistance against an antibiotic. That resistance trait could then spread through the population, making the entire population more resistant to that particular antibiotic.
Wow, that's actually pretty scary. So what about genetic drift? That sounds like a random force.
It is. Genetic drift is like a lottery. Imagine a small population of butterflies with different colored wings. By pure chance, some colors might be more common in the next generation. It's less about the fitness of the traits and more about random chance. And gene flow is like a mixing pot. Imagine two populations of trees separated by a river. If some seeds from one population cross the river and establish themselves in the other population, it introduces new genetic material. That's gene flow.
So, all these forces, combined with natural selection and the environment, create a complex tapestry that drives evolution. That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it helps to explain things like antibiotic resistance in bacteria and pesticide resistance in insects, which are really good examples of evolution happening right before our eyes.
It's amazing how evolution can happen so quickly in response to these pressures.
It's a reminder that evolution is not just a theory about the past, but something that's happening all the time. It's a crucial framework for understanding not just life's diversity, but also for dealing with challenges like antibiotic resistance in medicine and the impacts of climate change on biodiversity.
That's a powerful point. It's not just a historical explanation, but a critical tool for understanding the world we live in today.
Exactly. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the world of evolution. I hope you learned something new and maybe even changed your perspective a little.
Definitely learned a lot. I'm going to look at the world through a new lens for sure. Thanks for this insightful conversation.